On this Memorial Day weekend of 2024, it was announced that the remains of Pensacolian William Vernon Diamond were located along with the submarine USS Harder. There it lay at 3,000 feet near the Philippine island of Luzon, along with his 78 comrades. The submarine holds the distinction for sinking the most enemy ships during World War II, in addition to making a monumental impact on the outcome of the Battle of the Philippine Sea. May he and his comrades rest in peace, as their families now have closure to their 1944 sacrifice. U.S. Navy First Class Radioman William Vernon Diamond was born in Pensacola, Florida, on June 17, 1919, the son of Hubert Adeniran Diamond and Kitty Amelie Watson. Hubert had moved to Pensacola prior to 1910 to seek better employment. By 1916, Hubert and Kitty were married, and he was working as a carpenter at a local shipyard. 10 years later, the family was living at 400 7th Avenue in East Pensacola Heights. By 1942, William's two brothers were already in uniform, with Charles Douglas from the Pensacola High class of 1941, serving with the Army Air Corps, and Robert Franklin, class of 1942, in the Navy. William would enlist in the Navy on March 12, 1940, in Birmingham, Alabama. 3 months later, he found himself stationed aboard the heavy cruiser USS Quincy with a promotion to second class on July 12. By 1943, he volunteered for submarine duty and was sent to New London, Connecticut. Upon completing his training, he was transferred to the USS Hake in the Atlantic for anti-German submarine duty. The Hake was finally transferred to the Pacific Theater, arriving on December 6, 1943. There, he would transfer to the USS Harder on February 23, 1944, just as they set sail for the sub's fourth patrol. The USS Harder was a Gato-class submarine, commanded by Commander Samuel D. Dealey, from Dallas, Texas, who was awarded the Medal of Honor. Then came the Harder's fifth patrol on May 26, 1944, in the Tawi-Tawi area. Their new area was in one of the most obscure places in the world and located close to the oil fields that produced Tarakan crude oil. This type of crude was capable of being used raw without any type of refining. However, this type of oil was also highly volatile, an undesirable characteristic during a naval battle, and one that would cost the Japanese Navy 2 of their few remaining aircraft carriers. It was there, in the Submarine Passage, that the Harder discovered a convoy of 3 enemy tankers and 2 destroyers. Built and trained to attack, the Harder chased after the small flotilla on the surface, but because of the bright moon, she drew the unwanted attention of one of their escorts. When discovered, the Harder immediately submerged and turned her stern toward the charging destroyer. When the enemy ship came within range, she fired 3 torpedoes, 2 of which struck the Minetsuki, and sank her immediately in one massive explosion. Early the next morning, the Harder was sighted by an enemy patrol plane, which in turn brought out another Japanese destroyer. As the Hayanami bore down, the submerged vessel again fired 3 torpedoes at close range, striking the destroyer midships, sending her to the bottom in another fiery blast. On the evening of June 8, the Harder was again sighted by enemy destroyers patrolling in the Submarine Passage. This time the Harder was just a few miles from where the huge Japanese fleet lay anchored at Tawi-Tawi. She immediately submerged and fired 4 torpedoes at 2 of the oncoming enemy ships, blowing both the Tanakays and its companion out of the water. After the inevitable depth charging, the submarine set its course for a point just south of Tawi-Tawi to reconnoiter the enemy fleet at anchor. It was here on the afternoon of June 10 that the Harder sighted the large Japanese task force, including 3 battleships, 2 of which were the mighty Yamato and Musashi, and 4 cruisers with a screen of destroyers. Unfortunately, an overhead plane spotted the submarine at periscope depth, and one of their escorts promptly steamed toward her last reported position. Rather than running away, the Harder once again became the aggressor. At a range of 1,500 yards, she fired 3 torpedoes in what was known as a down-the-throat shot, then dove deep to escape the onrushing destroyer. Within a minute, 2 of the torpedoes blasted the ship with a tremendous force just as the Harder was passing under her keel at a depth of only 80 feet. The deafening explosions of the dying vessel shook the submarine far worse than any depth charge ever could. For the next 2 hours, she had to endure a tremendous bombardment from an infuriated enemy above. The next day, the Harder reconnoitered the WWII anchorage, where they sighted additional enemy cruisers and destroyers joining Admiral Ozawa's fleet. At 1600 hours, she headed for the open sea where Pensacolian William Diamond transmitted the information to Admiral Spruance. The Admiral had been desperately waiting for any data as to the enemy fleet's strength, position, or movements. Because of their ferocious attacks, Diamond and the crew of the Harder had depleted the enemy's ever-dwindling supply of enemy destroyers. Even more important, they convinced the Japanese admiral that WWII was surrounded by a huge fleet of American submarines, rather than just one. As a result, Admiral Ozawa's mobile fleet was forced to depart WWII a day ahead of schedule. Their premature departure upset the entire Japanese battle plan, and forced Ozawa to delay his arrival in the Philippine Sea. This delay most definitely brought about the stunning defeat he suffered in the ensuing Battle of the Philippine Sea, and all because of a young man from Pensacola and his fellow crewmen of the Harder. On August 5, 1944, Diamond departed on the Harder's 6th patrol, which was supposed to be his last before being rotated back to the States. To make his return home even sweeter, he had just received word that he had been promoted to chief radio man. Early the next day, Harder took part in an American wolf pack that sunk several coastal defense vessels and 2 frigates. The Harder and Diamond's old boat, the USS Harder, remained off Dassel Bay, searching for new targets. On August 24, the Harder dove deep to avoid a Japanese destroyer. But at 7:28 hours, the Harder's skipper heard a vigorous depth charge attack that, unbeknownst to him, had sunk the Harder with all hands. Her luck had finally run out. William's family and wife Violet Elizabeth Whittick were all notified that the Harder was missing. For the second time, his parents and wife would have no remains to bury, or a grave to mourn over, nor would there be any closure for the next 80 years. Sadly, the Diamond family had lost another son less than 4 weeks before, on Saturday, July 1, 1944. Their youngest son, Robert, was killed in the crash of his patrol bomber in the Atlantic Ocean, and his remains were never recovered. With 2 sons now gone, the Army ruled that their third son, Corporal Charles D. Diamond, would remain permanently on duty in the United States. The Diamond family had paid their price in blood, and the sole surviving son would live to pass on the family name. In November 1945, the Navy notified William's parents that they felt that the Harder had been sunk with all hands lost, and declared William dead. In May 2024, it was reported that the Harder and its crew had been discovered by Tim Taylor, the CEO of the Lost 52 project. His organization researches and attempts to locate the 52 submarines sunk during World War II. They found the Harder off the Philippine island of Luzon, still sitting upright, with the only damage noted being behind the conning tower from a Japanese depth charge. Japanese World War II records revealed that the Harder had fired 3 torpedoes at the Japanese destroyer. However, this time the enemy had been able to dodge the incoming missiles. The resulting depth charge attack would strike the Harder, sending William Vernon Diamond and his 78 crew members to a watery grave at the bottom of the Pacific.